2 years ago, a friend and I completed what I believe was the first ever true Palworld Nuzlocke. It took well over 60 hours over the span of almost 4 months, and we only beat the final boss with 38 seconds left on the timer. In hearing that, you may be saying the obvious point that this survival game was not designed for a Pokemon challenge run. And you'd be correct, but I'm stupid and 1.0 is out, so we're doing it again. If you've even heard of a Nuzlocke before, this is going to be a pretty standard rule set. You can only catch the first pal you find for each spawn zone. The reason the spawn map looks like that is something I go into more detail on in this video, but as a short answer, it's based around an in-game spawn map. Pal permadeath is turned on, and we are doing hardcore rule sets, which means you can't level past the next boss you have to defeat. Other than that, I want to draw attention to rules 7 and 8, because without them, it would be really easy to use my player as a bullet sponge, or just hide pals away in a sphere when they were getting to low health. I should also probably mention that I haven't beaten the game since that Nuzlocke 2 years ago, so I don't know if this is even going to be possible, but I'm already making my character, so it's too late to back out now. Upon spawning in, we have already found our first problem of the run. How am I gonna get a pal sphere before I see a pal? Right now, the game expects me to walk out this very obvious gate and go collect resources. But the problem is, there are pals out there, and I don't think I can get the resources I need for a pal sphere without having my first pal despawn and losing that catch opportunity. Conveniently for the challenge though, there does exist a chest behind you in the ruins, and it can have pal spheres roughly 30% of the time. So after just a couple of resets, I had the pal spheres that I needed and began climbing the mountain. Normally, your first capture of the game would be a Catava, Lamball, or a Chickapee. Maybe a Teefant if you somehow manage to get all the way down to the water without seeing anything, but I don't believe that's possible. However, there does exist a way to get a much stronger pool of pals, including the likes of Daydream, Fuddler, and even Turtackle. They're just all located in a cave behind where you spawn. And getting to that cave without seeing anything is really difficult, unless you climb the entire mountain and swim along the coast with your camera pointed at the rocks to make sure you don't see anything. Which is exactly what I did, landing me my first catch of the game, a Daydream named Thorn. I don't really have the time to celebrate this though, because we already have to get started on a base. Since Zoe and Griswold are only level 10, I'm on a very strict schedule for the early game. One wrong move and I could accidentally overlevel, nullifying this entire challenge run. Normally, your first base should be built somewhere near metal, but most of the early game metal spawns tend to have wild aggressive pals like Rushor next to them, and I don't want to risk losing any pals at my base. So instead, I decided to build up a little bit north of the Flying Fish coast. It has some metal nodes if you head south, but more importantly, there are like 0 wild pal spawns that can happen here. It was on my walk to this base location that I did catch my second pal of the playthrough, a Lamball named Light Fury after her alleged ability to kill dragons. I also completed the first of these new tower structures. They're dotted around the map and usually have either a minigame or a combat encounter you have to do before getting rewarded with some honestly really good loot for what level you're at. This epic feather headband schematic is going with me into the first tower boss. I only had the time to put down a couple of foundations and craft a few pal spheres before night fell over the island, and we immediately have to move on to catching again. While most of the early game spawns you catch in the daytime tend to get outclassed pretty quickly, the nighttime catches are a lot better later in the game. Things like Whizpaw, Hooker Tees, even Tombat's useful. Of course, my first nighttime catch wasn't any of those 3, it was a Jolthog. And every time I catch a Jolthog, I have to name it a Sonic reference. But luckily, I did catch a nighttime exclusive pal in the form of a Whizpaw named Ori. If it feels like I'm just breezing through these early game catches, that's kind of because I am. With experience being the largest bottleneck I have to contend with, I'm gonna keep catching pals until I find something strong enough to take on Zoe and Griswold. Too much time spent at my base or exploring caves for blueprints, and I might reach level 10 before I have a party strong enough to take on the boss. What would make me feel really safe about it is getting a strong ground type pal with a decent set of passive abilities, but the odds of me finding that are incredibly low. Unless, of course, I hypothetically spotted a rusher out of the corner of my eye after climbing over a cliff into a new spawn zone. But it probably won't have any good passive skills, and oh my god. Realistically, this is the single greatest catch I could have gotten for taking on Zoe and Grisbolt. Maybe this is the sign of a luck streak. Right next to me is the Rocky Autumn Forest, and it has probably the most versatile fire-type pal you can catch before taking on Lily and Lylene.
Monkey.
If I can catch one of those, I would feel confident enough to spend the rest of my time before taking on Zoe and Grisbolt working at my base. The odds aren't very high, but I said that about getting a ground-type pal, and we have a Rushroar with Musclehead. So maybe I can get lucky again and find a decent Tansiignis, and it's a Ruby. With Downtrodden. I feel like that's a sign to head back. I do have to cross through another catch zone in order to reach the nearest teleport point, and I found a Hangyu there, but it also has Downtrodden, so I'm really paying for that Rushroar. Back at base, a lot more progress was made. I managed to get a stone quarry, logging site, some pal beds, a feed box finally. I probably should have done that a while ago. And most importantly, the Epic Feather Headband. It's really not a lot of armor, but in the early game, I'm gonna take what I can get because it's my only option. You may have noticed that I still don't have a house for myself, and that's not gonna change. I want my first base to actually look nice, which means a lot of furniture pieces, and the more furniture pieces I place down, the more experience I'm gonna gain. The more XP I gain, the more likely I am to overlevel. So unfortunately, the house will have to come later. In between my base and catches, I did spend a little bit of time exploring the map and looting chests in hopes of finding some decent blueprints. The only thing I really came back with was a rare tropical outfit schematic, and more importantly, an epic crossbow schematic. Something that would be really great if its workbench wasn't locked behind level 11. I know this is very obviously intentional game design, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. That also leaves me with very few final preparations I can make before having to take on the tower. There are 2 catches left on the main island, which turned out to be a Pangolin named Rocket and a fairly powerful Celeray named Mamba, both of which are water types, which means there is 0 chance of them coming with me into the Grisbolt fight. I crafted up my armor, a 3-shot bow with some fire arrows, and delivered a special dish to a PIDF infantry officer for some Mozzarella cheeseburgers. These give me a 20% increase to my attack when eaten, and are easily the strongest buff you can get this early on in the game. So, after completing a dungeon to get my final level I needed, it was time to see if this was going to be doable. Being the first tower boss of the game, Zoe and Grisbolt should not be a difficult fight. But if you've seen my other videos, you know that I don't have a very good track record of keeping pals alive. Alright, short circuit. Take him out. That is not a lot of damage. Oh, that is not a lot of damage. This is with buffs. Also, how am I not lighting you on fire? I feel like I'm supposed to be able to light you on fire by now. Come on, short circuit. Am I using the right ammo? It's hold R, right? Oh, I'm not even using the fire arrows. No wonder I'm not dealing damage. That's more like it. I think we got this. I think we easily got this. There we go. Simple. I know it didn't sound like it, but I genuinely didn't think I would get this far without losing a single pal. I'm kind of blindly hopeful that this is a sign for the rest of the playthrough, because I've got almost 80 hours ahead of me still, and I really don't want to get super committed and lose the run. Of course, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We have a free Pal Alliance tower to take on.